back. We're live. We're ThinkTech Talks. We're not kidding about that. And because this is Wednesday, we're going to do energy.
Great. Energy Wednesday.
That's the voice of Sharon Moriwaki, who got back from a long trip and we all missed her. And now we see her and she looks rested and smiley face and everything. It's the old Sharon. Thank you for being here, Sharon, finally.
Good to be here. Good to be here, Jay.
And Larry Newman, we're going to get to Colin Yost in a minute. Larry Newman joins us on behalf of Hawaii Energy, also as the
guru
the
on
guru
megawatts.
and the
Guru on megawatts.
yeah, with sharp questions. Yeah, sharp questions.
Oh yeah, he does that too.
Okay, and our principal guest is Colin Yost of RevoluSun, and we're here to examine. The title of the show is Sunspots on Solar. You can make of that what you will, but I think it's clear enough what we're going to talk about. But before we get to that, let's get to Larry, because Larry didn't come down here just to see pretty faces. Larry came down with a mission. What exactly is the mission, Larry?
Well, we got this little megawatt moment that we try to kick the show off with every week. Shifting it up a little bit, today I wanted to share with you and your listeners an initiative that we're supporting. It's actually an initiative by the Blue Planet Foundation called WeFiciency. So they've put together a crowdsourcing platform targeting the nonprofit sector. And they're going to be launching it tomorrow formally. But in essence, this is a program that is intended to benefit Hawaii's nonprofits, strictly for them to do energy efficiency projects. We supported this project with some funding to help, clarify the actual pilot, so that the program Hawaii Energy can get some specific learnings from it, and hopefully continue to support it in the future. But the way people can play is and support WeFiciency is you can make a donation to your nonprofit. Who has a project in the form of a loan, which means you ultimately get your money back, but there's also an option for you to actually donate it through like a loanation. So, you can put $20 in to support your
loanation, and you forgive the loan. Is that the idea?
It's recycled, actually.
Recycled loan.
Yeah. So if you put $10 into, let's say, a couple of the nonprofits there are 3 that will be announced tomorrow, that you can say, hey, I believe in their mission. They've got an energy efficiency project. I'm gonna put $20 in. So I pledged $20. If the funding reaches the amount that's needed for the project, then the project's a go. So when that project gets done, there's a mechanism through this platform for you to get your $20 back. But you might say, you know what? I'm glad my nonprofit's doing well with this project and saving money on their electric bill. I don't miss those $20, so I'm gonna let it go to some other project. And so that $20 can grow over time as people, really buy into the whole mission.
And they'll be going to other projects then with that $20.
Right.
So, but do I have to fund the nonprofit? I have to pay this back? The first one, first donee.
With your energy savings, that's right.
I get to pay it back, but I get to pay it back to this venture of Hawaii Energy and Blue Planet.
Just through the WeFiciency platform.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then it'll go to some other needy nonprofit.
That's right.
And it keeps on floating around like
That's
that.
a good idea.
But I do have to pay it back.
The nonprofit does have to pay it back.
So.
But efficiency is very cost effective. So a typical lighting project pays for itself in 2 years. So the biggest hurdle is the upfront capital.
Suppose it doesn't work. Do I not have to pay it back if it doesn't work?
Oh, it'll work.
Then I'll have to pay it back.
Yeah.
It's always looking for the angles.
Do I have to pay it back with interest? This is interest free.
So that's where you got to stay tuned for tomorrow. Keep an eye out for the press release.
Okay. But you're here now, so I have some questions for you. Okay. Okay.
So
just
if we say the name and then you just nod or you shake your head.
We never promised you a rose garden, Larry.
No. But the website is WeFiciency. So
how do you spell that? W-E or W-E-E?
WeFiciency.
Oh, okay.
And it is a .org, and you can get some information there, and we'll take it from there.
Okay, so ThinkTech, it's a nonprofit in the fullest extent of the word.
Okay.
It's a 501c3. It wants to get some equipment, okay, electronic equipment. So this equipment will be very efficient. And instead of having 27 little boxes of electronics, one box of electronics, then maybe my math is primitive, but that's a fraction of what the electrical energy we were using before.
I mean, a good example would be all the LED lighting you have here.
We already have them, though. We don't need to get them again. We got them. I want to be honest with you about this. Let the record reflect that there's all these LED lights in here already. We can't play that card.
No, but your listeners could probably understand that better than we can a bunch of.
Okay, so this box, and instead of a lot of boxes, one box, we will save energy, okay? Does ThinkTech qualify for?
It's going to be efficiency to figure out.
Yeah,
Oh, so you should-
somebody
you
will
should
have to do the
apply.
math on this.
Yeah, you should apply and find out whether
Yeah.
you would
Yeah.
qualify.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
So we're trying to get the word out to people who might want to support efficiency in terms of a contributor of funds to these nonprofits, but they're also interested in getting the word out for those other 501c3s that may have an interest, because this is just going to be for the first 3 projects, but they want to develop a pipeline of other nonprofits.
I mean, I don't know about other nonprofits, but I would just throw this at you that, if you're a nonprofit and your cash flow is, something you lose sleep over, because it's based on grants and donations and all that, you're reluctant to make a loan because you have to pay it back. That's why. And it's the kind of
That's
thing on
true.
your very El Simplo bank, your El Simplo income statement that you want to have for
the
a loan.
nonprofit's
So
not.
I would be reluctant to make a loan in any amount for anything.
The nonprofit's not making the loan. It's all based on the energy savings. So it's just the community is basically supporting that project.
It's like an on-bill financing program for nonprofits. Is that sort of what you're
It's
doing?
not on bill, but it's
Okay.
just another mechanism.
So
to
what's
But
the
how much
maximum
about-
amount of the loan that you could make?
I don't think that's been determined.
Depends on what you buy.
We should talk, Larry. We haven't been spending enough time together. Sharon, what are you smiling at?
I know you're looking for all the angles. That's okay. It's good. It'll be good to
It went
test
from a
out the
megawatt
program.
moment to a megawatt,
Mega giant.
megawatt segment. That's okay.
It was negative, that's for
Megawatt.
sure.
Now it's a megawatt.
Okay, can we move on, or is there something else?
No, we can. We can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go to Colin Yost. Word has it that you're a lawyer, Colin.
I confess, yes, I'm a lawyer.
Do you know, I mean, people make jokes about lawyers. Do you think any of that's valid?
I didn't set out to be a lawyer after college.
The accidental lawyer.
And
We should rename the show here, The Accidental Lawyer.
When I did decide to go to law school after being in the nonprofit sector, actually, I had what's called a law shower. It's like a baby shower, but a lot less traditional. And I asked people to come and bring a lawyer joke with them, so I could try to hear them all up front. And I got
That's a good idea.
got a lot of good doozies.
Get it
that
out of their
are still
system.
with me.
Yeah. My partner, Ed Bendett, and I once went to a restaurant, and the waitress found out that we were lawyers, and she told us a lawyer joke, and she was so happy that she did such a good
Finally
job at
could say
telling
that.
this joke. And he's a very gravitas kind of guy, and he said, "I'm sorry, we don't laugh at lawyer jokes." She stopped right away. Anyway, so you got to be general counsel of RevoluSun. That is something. And I just wonder, can you give us a torturous route by which you got there? Because there
Sure.
are maybe others who want to do exactly what you did somehow.
That's right. Actually, I've spent time with some of those others. Even recently, University of Hawaii has what they call an Enviro Mentor program, where they ask attorneys who are in the environmental law field to go down, do some speed dating, essentially, with a whole bunch of people who are about to graduate from Richardson. And they all had great questions and interesting backgrounds, and there are a lot of people that are still trying to figure out ways to actually make a living from environmental law, which is not always simple.
Wasn't this predictable, though? You look at it, say, Sharon, you know the story. I mean, 10 years ago, 15 years, you notice that most of the lawyers in the world, around you that you meet in the street, environmental law, And I mean, I remember there was a guy actually in town who had a card that said, "Environmental lawyer, I only represent corporations."
So no one would be confused. Well, I started off at Lewis and Clark Law School, which is at the time was the #1 environmental law school in the country, and I had
To
intended.
both sides or just one side?
No, I think to both sides.
Okay.
There were certainly contingents there who had different interests. I was on what I'd call the more environmental preservation side. That was always my interest. But after law school, I couldn't get a job in environmental law directly. I went to work with the Attorney General's office in Oregon and worked there for 5 years as a prosecutor for civil fraud, financial, consumer fraud issues. But then I, interestingly, randomly got into some environmental stuff by prosecuting the likes of Enron and Duke
That would be
Energy,
real
and
fun.
Williams
Yeah.
Energy, and that was hugely entertaining, especially as a fairly young lawyer with only a couple years experience. When you're in a small office in the government, they sometimes give you lots of responsibility, and I took advantage of that and had a great experience. We wound up recovering over $32 million for the consumers in Oregon from those energy companies.
That's great.
Yeah,
I mean, it's sort of a chapter in your life where you can say it was great success.
It was, and then my wife, whom I met in law school, is from here.
Is she an environmental lawyer too?
She is not. She's a part-time. Well, actually, she's just moving to pseudo full-time recently, but she works in a small firm.
Doesn't do environmental
No,
law.
it's just civil litigation.
So pillow talk would not include environmental law.
We don't talk about law at home at all. We leave that out. But she let me know early in our relationship that we were going to be moving to Hawaii as soon as that was feasible.
She made that clear.
Yes, and I didn't object at all, obviously. It's an amazing place to live. But
Sometimes
that's-
your wife knows.
Yeah, exactly. Most of the time, really. And in any case, we came here. I took a job with the firm of Paul Johnson, Park and Niles at the time, which unfortunately has since disbanded and gone different ways.
Leah Hong was in the firm at the time.
She wasn't when I got there in
Oh, she came
2003,
afterward,
just
okay.
a little before, right before, I think.
Yeah.
But in any event, I mean, there was Pam Bunn and Cheryl Nicholson and Judy Tanaka and Jim Paul, obviously, was a lion of the bar at the time, and he's still a wonderful guy. But I left there after 3 years to start my own firm with a friend of mine because I wanted to do more environmental law cases and more consumer law cases that I cared more about personally. And I did that for 4 years as my little firm of Colin Yost. And then one of my clients, RevoluSun, asked me to come in-house and work with them full-time, which I jumped at because it was environmental law 100% of the time, and it looked like it was actually a viable business.
Why do you think they asked you as opposed to the man in the moon?
Well, I've been working with them since they first got into solar.
They knew the quality of your work and all that.
Yeah, we had a good relationship.
What happened to poor Cruz?
Oh, he's doing quite well. he's now at the firm of Levitt Yamani and Solder. He's doing very well.
Successful firm.
Yeah.
Okay, so here we are now, and you're general counsel of RevoluSun for how long?
A little over 4 years.
You've seen a lot. I mean, there's been,
Yeah.
if you want to pick the most important 4-year period in solar, it's been that 4 years.
Yeah, we've gone through exponential growth, which was very difficult to manage and exciting as well, and now we've gone into a period of decline over the last, since September 6th of 2013.
September 6th.
Exactly.
Something happened on that day.
What time?
At what time of day, right? Thank you, Larry.
Yeah, I don't know, about maybe 11 a.m. or so when we got the announcement. That's when the HECO policy dramatically shifted
Oh,
on
yeah,
the island of Oahu.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Everybody got hurt by that. So, but the thing is, let me just throw this in the pot. The solar, you guys were kind of an exception because you were startup, you were very akamai. I remember deals that you did that really, were really good deals. I mean, win-win-win.
Mm-hmm.
And very creative deals you were making, in my observation of it. Mark Duda was a really creative guy. He could
Still is.
He could grow a deal anywhere.
Yeah.
And still is, of course. He was really a leader in the industry, and the reason, I think, was because he could figure out stuff. He could make best practices
Right.
where, the average installer wouldn't think of that. But you guys are unusual, and there were a lot of installers out there that were running this kind of like a door-to-door sales thing. You can still find installers like that. I mean, I walk my neighborhood, and there'll be some job going on, and the guy will be down off the roof. He wants to talk to me right now, and he wants to sell me a system right now. This really happens.
Wow.
But just saying that, you're an exception, and there were a lot of others who were not really sustainable, but they made money while the thing was going gangbusters.
Right.
So it couldn't, as an industry, don't you agree? It couldn't go, double the volume every year, on and on and on. It just doesn't happen like that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we live on an island. There are finite resources the sun is an endless resource, but in terms of space to put solar panels, that's finite. However, we haven't come close to reaching the actual demand saturation or resource saturation.
Resource saturation, I think, is more operative, because demand depends on whether people, there are people still out there who want to do this.
Correct, and there are. I mean, that hasn't changed at all. We feel that consistent pressure of demand. It's just being able to meet the demand and actually interconnect these systems to the grid that's the problem at this point.
Okay, so let's get to that. I mean, this is really important. I was saying, to Colin before the show began, that I think we're in a kind of strange tipping point kind of place where we've had phenomenal growth. I mean, up until last year, it's been double every year. I mean, where do you find that in any industry? Now all of a sudden it's not. It's going down. It continues to go down. Marginal operators are out of business. It isn't working. And there's, big fight with HECO. So, where are we in that continuum right now, as far as you see?
I'd like to hope that we've hit bottom and are actually on the slight incline at this point. And I think that actually is true. I mean, HECO has, just abruptly slammed the brakes on everything. But then they did start trying to figure out how to restart things. And what's been going on during that period is that I feel it's like pressure behind a dam that just keeps building up and building up and building up.
On which side of the dam?
Well, behind it. And so it's got to break. There's got to be some kind of
the pressure
release
from the people who want
from the
solar.
demand. Correct.
But
correct.
but I
And from the PUC, frankly, most recently. The PUC has added to that pressure. HECO, what they did is, instead of trying to do individual studies on all of the circuits that form our grid, they started representative studies of certain circuits which they felt would be instructive and tell them about the other circuits, which is an efficient way of doing it conceptually. And they were supposed to be done with that work by now, with those studies.
study
They haven't
all
come
the
out-
circuits.
Well, of those representative studies,
Okay,
which then will, theoretically, tell them what to do about everything.
Yeah.
That was their stated goal, right?
Yeah. But aren't the circuits all different?
Well, not dramatically in terms of, and this is mostly as it relates to smaller residential. It's not going to necessarily give them answers to the larger commercial projects. They still require pretty much anybody who's doing a significantly large commercial project to do an interconnection requirement study. But for the small residential, which is under 10 kilowatts, is almost all of the residential really. You can meet a fair amount of the average house's needs, or all of it, with under 10 kilowatts. For those, they were doing just these representative studies, and then that was supposed to be the answer for everybody.
And the representative studies would say, no, you can't do it. And
No.
then they would translate that into many other circuits. Is that what?
Yeah, it was never going to be no, you can't do it. It's just you can do it, but you're going to have to add some extra equipment to your house, or you're going to have to pay for some pro rata upgrade to the substation to allow your circuit to have a little bit more PV on it.
When we come back,
Yes.
I want to ask you, were they right? Are they right? And if they're wrong, why are they wrong? I'm curious.
Okay. All right.
Okay, deal? Sharon?
Sounds
She
good.
agrees. Larry, are you on board with this?
I'm agreeable.
Okay.
I'm agreeable with that.
Our principal guest is Colin Yost. He's General Counsel of RevoluSun. We're here on ThinkTech Talks, talking about energy. On Wednesday, Hawaii, the state of clean energy, and we're talking about sunspots on the solar. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Martin Despang, and I'm the host together with the one and only Ali Yamashita, and our show is called Urban Transcendence. And Urban Transcendence is about identifying where we have a unique situation of a vibrant city in one of the most beautiful natural environments. So how these two can coincide, sometimes conflict, how they could find reciprocity in the 21st century is what we're excited about. And we're planning on bringing in a diverse body of guests, both from the arts and the science and the established and the wise and the emerging generation. So hope you will join us. We'll always be on Thursdays from 1 to 2 p.m.
Also, I'd like your views
Okay,
on
we're back. We're
utility
live.
scale versus what you're doing.
And Sharon too. She's also back. We're gonna have this. We're gonna have this show now.
Okay, all right.
Hawaii, the state of clean energy, here with Colin Yost and Larry Newman and Sharon Moriwaki, talking about the sunspots on solar. Well, before we go back, I just want to say that we did this thing about Kaka'ako. Sharon was there this afternoon. It was a finally finding your future in Kaka'ako. It's really interesting. Like 150, 60 people showed up.
It was good.
And we had a panel the size of a jury box. It was really good. And Steve Petranek of Hawaii Business was our moderator. And there were 93 questions posed.
It was good, though.
If we
that
did
whole
one on
system.
solar, the same thing would happen. But it's on the web. You can listen to it, stem to stern. We live streamed the audio, okay? And when you live stream the audio to Spreaker.com, it keeps it for a while. So if anybody wants to listen to that, they can. Just go on Spreaker.com or ThinkTechHawaii.com and look for our live stream audio. In the same vein, to follow up on the Kaka'ako program, tomorrow, Thursday, the 22nd, at 5 p.m. in 828 Fort Street is going to be a really interesting gathering of the AIA, also about all these concepts that go into the planning of Kaka'ako. And there's a lot of good conversation about this. We could be sort of a design leader if we focused on it. Anyway, they got a lot of architects coming down. They have, the network media going to be there. And we are likewise going to broadcast the sound live at 5 tomorrow on ThinkTechHawaii.com, so you can hear that. I'll be listening because I'll be there broadcasting it.
Good.
Okay, so back to the question. So is Hiko right about this? I mean, how is there a boundary somewhere where they have to say no? And how do you determine the boundary? And is the boundary that they are working with the right boundary?
Okay. Well, the boundary that they've been using, at least in terms of how they describe what they're doing, is called daily minimum load. And that's the minimum amount of energy, the least amount of energy that a circuit will need in a given day. So they've been saying, well, if solar is above 100% of that DML, that daily minimum load, we have to start thinking about adding different equipment to the house.
To what?
Well, ultimately to avoid backflow is one of their main concerns, where let's say that theoretically solar was producing more than that circuit was using at a given point in time. Then power would start flowing back to the substation for that circuit, and they would have to figure out what to do with it. Now, if they had a storage system at that substation, they could just store it and use it later when it's dark or whenever it was needed. Most substations, or maybe even all at this point, don't have that kind of storage capability in any significant respect. That's something that the PUC actually highlighted in its recent orders to HECO, saying you've got to develop better storage at the substation level, because that is critical to managing these distributed generation resources that produce power in a fluctuating and intermittent manner. They're not a constant power source like an oil power plant that you just turn on and it makes a constant stream of electricity.
But Sharon will tell you this is all about net energy metering, and the flow you're talking about is the flow of excess electricity that
Right.
runs from the house back to the system.
Right.
But you could solve this in the stroke of a pen if you said, look, you can have the solar. You can build as much solar as you want. You can cover your house in it. Just you can't send that much back. And either you get batteries to hold it, or you don't generate it.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be saving a lot of effort.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't send it back past a certain point. Okay, and it's a numerical number somehow.
Right.
Why don't we, and meanwhile, the solar is still beneficial.
Right.
It may not work on the spreadsheet as well because, you're not getting the net energy metering factor back, which is, some people think it's too high.
Mm-hmm.
There should be a wholesale rate instead of a retail rate when you get credit for it when you're selling it back. But why not just say, look, we're going to put a little black box on your house, or you put it on, you spend it when somebody spends the money. You can have solar, everywhere, but you can't sell it back if these certain conditions exist. And we can negotiate those conditions.
Mm-hmm.
We can sit down in a room, close the door, throw the key away, and we're going to negotiate exactly where the black box trips you off. But it's not a terrible tragedy, because you can always go to Joe Saturnia and buy the Empower system or something like that, and it'll save as much for 3 or 4 days.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why don't we just do that? Why is all the consternation? People get so emotional. They go down. I think there were people crying, installers crying in the state senate.
Yeah.
If you want to cry, cry at home. You know what I mean? I mean, it's so emotional and yelling, and when really it's a matter of just a black box. I mean, that's the way I see it.
Well, the black boxes that exist out there are still are not the best technical solution yet. They exist, but some of the ones that HECO has been proposing recently, I mean, we've been analyzing them. They've got shorter-term warranties. They aren't necessarily designed for Hawaii's humid climate. I mean, that technology is still kind of playing catch-up, but it's also a recipe for a less reliable solar system, because let's say those things trip off, and what if they don't turn on again? If there's some defect in them, then that has to be addressed and dealt with by both.
Well, let's just say we find a box that works.
Yeah. Well, that's.
I mean, there's got to be somebody out there who can make
it's
a
not
box.
it's not an inconceivable part of the solution. However, it will necessarily reduce the amount of renewable generation that we have in our overall
The
system.
spreadsheet changes.
But we're trying to increase the amount of renewable generation overall. So I think if all things equal, if you could do a storage solution that continues to increase the amount of overall generation, or if you start doing, interruption devices that decrease the amount. If these things cost around the same, you'd want to do the storage solution.
I would.
Because you get more of the renewable, which we need as an island, plus it's
I don't
more
have to go into
reliable.
that formula.
Yeah.
I don't have to buy anybody else's numbers.
That's right.
Because I know I'm always going to have the benefit of that.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know Joe Saturnia is not the only guy in the market making them, but
Right.
but the fact that some guy here in Honolulu can put this together,
Yeah.
that we can actually make the that box, anyway, the battery box.
Sure.
That's encouraging.
You can
so
do
why
it.
don't you guys do that?
It's from our perspective, there just isn't enough of a market for it yet. They're very expensive relative to
$15,000 for an
other
ordinary
options.
home. That's a lot of money.
But it's not just that. It's you have to then worry about that as your other side of your energy management. Really, if you're doing off-grid these days, you should probably have a Honda generator or something else as a safety backup if you're not connected to the grid at all.
You mean with fossil fuel?
Yeah, I mean, what other option do you have? I mean, actually, I just heard today, Hank Rogers, the Blue Planet founder, has this building on the Big Island where he's designed the whole thing
habitat.
perfectly, right?
Yeah.
And he's got a hydrogen power plant attached to his house, and his solar is actually generating hydrogen that's then being used to power in a hydrogen car. So that's the complete cycle right there, right? But he's obviously at the very cutting edge.
But don't you love that?
I love it. I love it.
Because
That's
hydrogen
fantastic.
is effectively a battery.
Yeah.
You hold it in the tank, leave
storage,
it there.
yeah.
It can stay there for weeks, months, years. You can sell it offshore.
Yeah.
You just need the technology on both ends to make it efficiently. And that's what you want to concentrate on, Larry.
Someday.
But that's the kind of innovation that should be coming from the utility.
Yeah.
Right? The utility, it shouldn't just be people like Henk who are out there designing these things and doing them. It should be the larger scale, powerful entities in this state should be making strides.
I agree with you. I would agree to the extent that saying that is the question. It's the old distributed versus what's the other part?
Centralized.
Centralized.
Yeah.
So you say, we know that we need batteries. We know that we need electronic systems. We know we need black boxes to control this, at the far end.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all fair and everybody knows it's transparent and all that.
Yeah.
But who is going to essentially bear the cost of it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So when you say the utility, I mean, other people say that too. There's people on both sides of it. When you say the utility, you're saying that all ratepayers, right? And I suppose the stockholders too of Hawaiian Electric
Sure, absolutely.
have to buy into these boxes and batteries and whatnot and do it at the centralized level.
Yeah.
But you could make a pretty good argument to say, well, the homeowner made the decision to get the solar. He spent whatever it is. He gets a tax credit for that. Why doesn't he pick up the tab for all these control devices? Why doesn't, if he wants batteries, he can get batteries. If he wants to protect himself against curtailment or whatever, he can work with that. I'm just thinking that to me, it's not an absolute.
Sure.
You're in business.
Yeah.
And
No, I think every consumers accept that at this point they may need to pay a little bit more to help upgrade the grid, and that's not the problem so much. The problem is not knowing what they need to do. HECO just isn't telling people yet what they need to do. If they came out and said, okay, anybody can connect to the grid, but you're going to have to pay an extra $3,000, and this is the process for doing that, and you'll get approved within 2 weeks if you agree to pay this extra money. A lot of people will be okay with that.
I would do that.
Yeah,
But I would also be willing to take less for the energy I sent back to them, because I really don't think, I think what happens now is HECO, that's me, because I'm a ratepayer down the street. HECO is paying too much for the energy that's sold back. Yeah. And people, take that as an entitlement. But I mean, I'd be willing to do that for the common cause, for the community. I mean, most people, I think they would. So there's another major issue that you've identified, and that is the way in which this is presented to the public.
Right.
What deals are out there for the public? And I suppose if you put your HECO cap on for a minute and made yourself a general counsel of HECO or somebody who would advise them,
Sure.
you would say, why don't you do that? Just be definite about it.
That's what I would do for sure. I think that one of the things that's in the most recent Pacific Business News is Dick Rosenblum, the president and CEO of HECO, is talking about how there's no question we need to evolve to meet the changing expectations and needs of our customers, and now more than ever you expect prompt and useful information, choices, and control. I mean, that's a wonderful statement, and that's exactly what needs to be put into practice. If action isn't taken to make this kind of statement real, then these large ads they're taking out are just PR. But they shouldn't be just PR. They should be part of the solution. HECO's acknowledged and accepted that it's part of the solution, and that distributed generation specifically is part of the solution. The PUC has acknowledged and is pushing for HECO to do more. So really it's just communication. Tell us what needs to happen and make it definitive and timely so that people can make choices and control their energy sources. That's just exactly it.
Yeah. You want to argue with him, Larry?
Case closed.
Sharon, what about you?
I think Colin's right on, but also in terms of looking at people and their choices, what do people want? Because sometimes they don't know, and they don't know what the options are, and how do you present that, from HECO to the people, or from, say, RevoluSun and other companies working directly with people. What are their needs and how might they present it so that they do make the right choices?
Sure.
how
Well, I mean, first and foremost, people want to save money on electricity. Electricity in Hawaii is far too expensive. Everyone acknowledges that. That's a result of years and years and years of failed planning, frankly, in terms of where we get our energy from. These resources, the sun has been here all along. Solar panels have been expensive in the past, but they were still viable and at scale.
Yeah, but gas prices weren't that high. You know,
Well,
people really weren't focusing on this. I mean,
Yeah.
it only really started in 2008. And 2008 is what? How many years ago? It's 6 years ago. That's all it is.
Yeah, well, I guess I came from Oregon in 2003, and so there it's, what, 7 cents a kilowatt hour or less, and it was immediately much, much higher when I came here. But it's a matter of perspective, I guess, a little bit. But in any event, you know, it's just a question of acknowledging what needs to happen and really starting to make strides in that direction more
But
quickly.
that's a really good point, and I'd like to, before we go to this break, mention that in the Kaka'ako program today, Mike Formby, he's the Director of Transportation Services, made a very noble and philosophical point. Did you catch it, Sharon?
I'm not
He
sure.
said, we have
Not
great
what-
ideas, you know, we have great ideas
to
about what we're
execute,
going to do, but if you want my, action plan, it's execute the ideas. Stop talking about them,
Yeah.
execute. And we should talk about that when we come back from the break. This is Hawaii, the state of clean energy at ThinkTech Hawaii. We're talking about sunspots on the solar. I still like that title. With Colin Yost, who is General Counsel of RevoluSun, a notable and one of the originals, actually, of the photovoltaic contractors in the state. We'll be right back after this break.
I'm Hong Jiang, host for Asia in Review on Tuesdays.
And I'm David Day, host for Asian Review on Thursdays. Both of us broadcast our respective shows at 4 p.m.
And my topics tend to deal with questions related to environment, culture, history, and sometimes human rights.
And my shows tend to be on international business, foreign policy, geopolitics, and national security. And you can watch our shows live on the ThinkTech website at thinktechhawaii.com.
And you can also watch us on YouTube or Olalo.
So come join us on Thursdays at 4 p.m. I'm David Day.
And on Tuesdays at 4 p.m., I'm Hong Jiang.
Aloha.
Okay, we're back. We're live. I'm Jay Fidell here on ThinkTech. We're doing Hawaii, the state of clean energy, because it's Wednesday. We always do. We're talking about sunspots on the solar with Colin Yost, General Counsel of RevoluSun. We have Larry Newman from Hawaii Energy, who is just a coiled spring waiting to pop all these third-degree cross-examination questions on Colin. I hope you're ready for that, Colin.
I'm ready.
And Sharon Moriwaki was also a secret lawyer. Secret but real. And
as are you.
she has actually a question that she was asking during the break. What is your question, Sharon?
I wanted to know the difference and how the approach would be with utility scale generation versus the PV that you have for the commercial residential that's more decentralized, and what are the differences, and what does that mean for the overall benefit for our community and meeting our goals?
Okay, well, I think that there is room for both. Both have been growing very quickly over the last 5 years. HECO has jumped on the utility scale bandwagon recently and has been asking for more RFPs for large-scale solar projects. There is a lot of land on Oahu that isn't very productive agriculturally. It's D or E class farmland, and it's a permitted use right now to put solar farms on that land. It's also very low impact in terms of the land use, because when you install those larger scale projects, you can do so without paving over the whole land. Actually, if you go to Lanai, you can see a little over a megawatt solar project that has sheep grazing underneath it. And the land itself is not all that dramatically impacted. Some types of crops are actually possible under solar as well, although usually the land that you choose for solar is not that great for farming to begin with.
Have you guys been doing that kind of solar farm?
Yes, we have. We've installed a number of larger ones.
I personally like that a lot. I mean, I know in terms of square footage and rooftops and versus using other land, you don't have to spend any land at all on rooftops.
Right.
So there's a benefit there. But
Yeah.
in terms of organizing it and making it fair to all the, equal footing for all the ratepayers, I really like, and I think there's probably enough land because these cells are getting more efficient, so you need less of a footprint all the time. And the one out in Kapolei is over junk land. It was land with what do you call it, toxic chemicals in it. We're not worried about losing that land. And you're right about Lanai. It's the cutest thing in the world to see the sheep. They're having such a good time under the panels.
Yeah, they get a little extra shade.
It gives them shade. Yeah, exactly.
That's true.
So why don't we just go focus on that big time? I mean, are we moving to that? I mean, after all, HECO has a big RFP out now, and last I heard is that a lot of people had responded to that RFP from probably all over the world. No, I hope you're among them.
I don't believe our company is bidding on the largest project. It's a little right. We've been focused on other things, not focused on spending all of our time doing that, which you'd have to do if you're doing an enormously large project. I don't think it's an either-or proposition. You can do both. You can figure out ways to manage the grid and adjust the grid to allow both. And whatever resources we have that are eligible, convenient, that financially make sense, we should take advantage of them. Whenever we can lower the cost of our energy and improve our impact on the world in terms of climate change, we should always do it.
So is there any conditions, or what would be the checklist of whether you go utility scale versus the more decentralized commercial residential?
I guess I'm still pushing back on the idea that there needs to be a checklist. I think you can do both.
Just depending on how much land you have.
Who's you though?
Yeah.
Who's you?
So
I mean,
the
if I was a
landowner
solar
probably-
company, I would do every job I could do.
Right.
Yeah.
So the landowner has to make that decision.
Well, the landowner, in the case of a commercial farm, is going to be some large landowner versus a small guy. I mean, I think the utility is probably a person who could think about that issue. The PUC is a person who could think about that issue. I mean, so, to me, this question is a larger question. How exactly do we, where do we want to focus our energies?
Who
No
makes
pun
the
intended.
choice?
Such a
Sure.
bad
Where is
pun.
the choice being made?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, the utility has to be involved in that choice, especially with the larger projects. Those have a much more significant intermittent impact on energy management. You have just a larger amount of energy coming from one place, right? So, in all of the projects we've been involved in, they've generally required some kind of more detailed study, and then there have been requirements, imposed upon that project. For the much larger projects, usually a new substation is required, and the developer pays for that cost of the new substation.
Well, this goes to the whole question of what is a smart grid, and isn't it true that smart grid equipment can help, ameliorate
Manage
these
it.
overload problems that we're talking about? And do we have it now? I don't think so, not in large numbers. How do we get it? Who pays for it? How sophisticated is it? How much can it do for us? Maybe the answer is really simple, that if the community, and that means everybody, decides they want to, allow all sources on, then the community has got to pay for smart grid stuff. It may not be necessary to have 5 days of storage, although that would be sweet. But other things that can, smooth the curve and make it easier at peak time. And so, is that happening? Is that likely to happen? How do you make that happen?
It's all a matter of will on behalf of the utility, and then also how much the PUC is willing to really push the utility to change. I mean, their recent orders from the PUC are crystal clear that they want all of these things to happen. They want grid modernization to happen, and they want the grid to be more flexible in the way it accepts power and distributes power. So they're literally demanding all of these things. They're now pounding their fist on the table, and they've said that they were profoundly disappointed in the most recent filings by HECO. They described the projects they were proposing as sort of a disconnected group of capital projects that didn't seem to cohere into any kind of real plan. And they want the plan, and they want also, it's an action plan. They want it to be implemented.
Well, but we need to be talking about money too.
Yeah.
You said a minute ago the public wants to pay less for energy.
Right.
And indeed, we all want that because it's really expensive, and it's more expensive than every state on the mainland. But when you put in smart grid stuff, when you buy batteries and black boxes, it has to cost money.
Yep.
And somewhere along, I always make jokes about this. Somewhere along the line, the clean energy initiative that Sharon is so very familiar with turned into the cheap energy initiative.
That would be very
And now if you talk to the
Yes.
average Joe, he will say, I'm mad at them because they're not giving me cheap energy. But he will not understand that you can't make the conversion to clean without buying new gear.
Yeah.
And
Gets
that gear
expensive
costs a
before it gets
lot of
cheap.
money, millions and hundreds of millions and billions. On a statewide basis, somebody's got to pay for it. And it's not as if, there's somebody up there in heaven that's going to make this happen. So if I came to you and said, look, here's $5 billion, Colin, give me good power, you can do it.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, but you, and I could probably do it without an undersea cable too. That's a whole other conversation. If we're thinking about upgrading, utilities always have to worry about upgrading their equipment. I mean, a lot of their plants are now on the decline, and they've already started to take some out of commission. They took the Honolulu one out of
Here's
commission.
the problem. So, okay, we got to upgrade the equipment.
Yes.
Okay, we got to fix this. We got to add this, and
Yeah.
those orders and decisions. You guys have to, get up to snuff on all this stuff. But who's going to pay for that? I mean, I don't think the PUC is really giving him any guidance on that.
Yeah.
Just
No.
do it. But wait a minute, it costs a lot of money. Do it anyway.
Well, one of the advantages of distributed generation is that the developers have to pay for the actual power generation part, right? HECO doesn't have to worry about building a new plant, right? They just need to worry about how they're going to allow that new power onto the grid. Usually when they add new generation, they have to worry about both things,
Yeah.
right? But they only have to worry about the second
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
So that really is an advantage for everybody, for all the ratepayers. And if you were thinking, for example, just to kind of merge into the liquid natural gas topic,
Yep.
if you're looking at that as a bridge, you're going to have to obviously do a lot of capital infrastructure improvement to have this new resource brought into the state. You can't just use the same stuff they've been using to burn the LNG. So you
People
think
don't
about it.
realize that either.
Yeah, I mean, think about that, and so if are they going to? Should we spend money on that, or should we spend money on dramatically increasing the flexibility and capabilities of the existing grid to allow other people to pay for generation of renewable power, which is better for the state and better for the climate?
You have any opinion on that question?
I guess my statement's kind of loaded.
The original loaded.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
right.
and a lot of people feel that way. I mean, why build a whole new big system? And again, infrastructure, again, those costs that somebody has to pay. And on a temporary basis, because
Yeah.
it's supposed to be only a bridge.
Right.
But we're cruising down that track pretty quickly, though,
That's
now.
right. And then if battery technology, I mean, the other big elephant in the room is that battery technology, where off-grid systems become truly viable and affordable, is only a few years away. So how long is that timeline? And if you still have very expensive grid power at that point, the market will drive everyone away from the grid. And you will just have everyone, just like most people who are in the younger generation don't have landlines, right? They all have cell phones. And it's the same
That's
phenomenon.
distributed.
If you've got something that's cheaper and more convenient and easier to use, although it's amazing how much they charge you for cell phones, but you're going to choose that automatically. It's the market will just drive that choice.
Well, that's the problem with LNG, because
Yeah.
I mean, it may be shorter. I mean, in the short term, it may be cheap.
Cheaper, yeah.
In the long term, it's the hidden cost.
That's right.
So it's not, the market sometimes is like naive to think, oh, well, I pay less now. I don't have to worry about it later. But somebody does have to worry about it later.
Yeah, I mean, Blue Planet is very vocal in saying that LNG is not a bridge to anything.
Well, they don't like
It's-
fossil fuel.
They don't like fossil fuels at all. That's true.
I have to separate the argument with the agenda.
but I guess I'm more sympathetic to their agenda, not just because I'm in a related industry, I guess, but they are a nonprofit, and that's their public policy perspective. It's not their perspective because, like me, they want to make money, or like HECO, they want to make money. So I tend to give them a little more credibility.
So you guys, we have, oh gee, we only have a couple of minutes to play. I'm really enjoying this conversation, Colin. So what's your uptake on this? I mean, where should we go? What would you ask, what you want to try to pin him down on kind of a solution?
Are the prices for PV going to go down as well?
I think that, yeah, I mean,
Is there
we
gonna
have
be a
some.
reach of parity between the centralized and the distributed where?
Yeah, I think that that's improving. I mean, installers are becoming more efficient at installing. Module prices have been steadily going down, although there may be a little uptick because of some tariff disputes with China, and that's all very complicated. But generally speaking, I mean, they're becoming more efficient. You know, I think when I started working in the industry, panels were usually, 180 watts per panel, and now they're 345 watts per panel for the most efficient kinds
like
you can buy.
6 feet by 3 feet or something like that.
Yeah, and so you put the same amount of space, and the panels are the same size as they used to be. So it's just this dramatic increase in efficiency. That's slowing down, but there are still strides to make there. So over time, it should be cheaper and cheaper.
And we also talked about utility scale, rooftop. Where does the community solar? That's another topic that started to come about.
Oh, you mean like?
The bill passed. Yeah, the bill just
Yeah,
passed. Yeah.
right.
Well, and the microgrid in the Parker Ranch, it's very interesting. I mean, we don't know that much about it yet, but this could be a cookie cutter solution for a community, a small municipality, a company, a group of companies, a condo project.
Yeah, no, the more solutions, the better. From my perspective, it's all the different ways that we can facilitate the entry of distributed generation into the grid, and microgrids are another part of that probable solution for sure.
But don't you agree that when you're changing so many things, you get so many things in the soup, it's fits and starts, and everybody gets along with each other, there's contention, there's arguments, there's litigation, what have you. There are some people who are closer and understand it better, other people who are further away and more emotional, and it's like tumultuous. But we're in a transformation. Transformations are tumultuous, sometimes painful.
Yeah.
And we're not through it yet. We haven't settled on a solution yet.
I think that really at this point the ball is in HECO's court. They can make this so much better than it is right now. And they've promised to get back to the public very soon. I mean, it should be any day now, really, with the results of their representative studies. If those studies do what we hope they do, which is to explain a clear and direct system of allowing everybody to connect, whether it's with some additional cost or no additional cost, depending on the situation.
Don't forget my black box.
Yeah, I'd like to avoid the black boxes. I just think they're not good for consumers, and they create a lot of extra work and inefficiency.
Well, the problem, not to spend any time on it,
Yeah.
the problem for a PV company is you go to the consumer with a spreadsheet and it shows all his benefits, and if I put a black box in that system, you can't give him the same spreadsheet, so your ability to sell him, show him the savings is not as good. That's the problem.
That's true. That's generally that it creates uncertainty and confusion. Whenever there's uncertainty in any market, the market's not going to do as well. I mean, that's an economic axiom.
Yeah. Well, to be continued. I mean, we're in the middle of it, and don't forget that Dick Rosenblum is speaking at the Hawaii Clean Energy Day on July 22nd. It's a Tuesday. I hope you'll be there. You really should be there.
Yes.
Larry, this is right up your alley.
You're always there.
Maybe at that time he will continue on the track from the PBN article you were looking at.
I hope he does. I'll take him at his word, and I just hope to start seeing results.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to Mike Formby, execution,
That's right.
and not with a killing.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, well, this has been great. Hawaii State of Clean Energy, the ThinkTech series, Sunspots on our solar,
You
number
like
one,
that title.
with Larry Newman as cross-examination interrogator, Sharon Moriwaki as co-host, and Colin Yost as our principal guest. He's from RevoluSun, and he's the general counsel, and he's enjoying himself a lot doing the right thing. Thank you so much, Colin.
Thank you, Jay. Thanks,
Thank
Sharon.
you. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry.